The very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society. And we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings. We decided long ago that the dangers of excessive and unwarranted concealment of pertinent facts far outweighed the dangers which are cited to justify it.
Hello, this is Dane Wigington with GeoEngineering Watch Radio, the Global Alert Weekly News Hour update for the week of June 11th, 2016. We've just passed yet another week of planet Earth and populations around the globe under siege. This show is broadcast throughout Northern California on Saturday mornings, 6 to 7 a.m. on KQMS. It's also reposted at geoengineeringwatch.org and the KQMS website for those who aren't up that early in the morning. It's a commercial-free news hour, no sponsors to appease. Geoengineeringwatch.org pays for this hour. Our thanks to KQMS for allowing real frontline global news to be addressed. Our planet is dying, our forests are dying, and even now the vast majority of the population is completely asleep at the wheel. And for all those who don't want to hear such headlines, all those who run away from them, deny them, and do everything to avoid them, why are you here? If you're not here for the common good, for the greater good, to try to preserve the future of your children, why are you here? What do you focus your time on, if not something of that gravity and magnitude? I first started sounding the alarm on the tree die-off nearly a decade ago, and no one heard that. And I'm not the only one. Many people have been sounding the alarm for many years. People like Rachel Carson. But for those who live in the herd of environmental cataclysm denial, such headlines are only scoffed at and walked away from. I've just returned from a trip to Yosemite National Park. Massive forest die-off, while hordes of completely oblivious tourists drive around in their shiny new cars and motorhomes, completely oblivious to the environmental cataclysm happening around them. I had a meeting with an internationally known rock climbing icon of the Yosemite Valley, Ron Koch. I'll get to my meeting with Ron later in this broadcast. It was a profound few days with an exceptional human being that I'm honored to have connected with. First, some global headlines to cover. Lots of headlines. I'm trying to get to a sample of that, but understand, while people are watching the theater of election in our country that's with actors that are approved by the power structure, no matter how much people want to convince themselves that these elections mean anything, with the choice of Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton, that should be a shocking wake-up call to just how dire our situation is. And these people are absolutely part of the power structure. Both of them, they both know how long their leash is. We are truly headed into dark days with choices like this. Headlines: by making the stock market the only game in town, the powers that be can no longer afford to let it decline for any reason. Because that's the grand facade, isn't it? Keep the stock market up, no matter how bad the environment is, no matter how much the oceans die, no matter how catastrophic the headlines are from around the globe. For many people, as long as the stock market is up, as long as they feel their retirement is safe, everything is okay in their world, in their bubble. But those bubbles won't protect them for much longer. The grand facade is imploding by the day. Another headline: Pynchon's time bomb in slow motion detonation in U.S., EU, and internationally. There are not resources to support the completely unsustainable system that has been set up. And for those who think that they are safe because they have a big number in their retirement account, that number will mean nothing very, very soon. Wait and see. Another headline: currency wars re-escalate as Bank of Korea eases to record low rate with surprise rate cut. Central banks around the globe are simply printing money and pumping it into the system to keep it afloat, to keep the pyramid scheme afloat just a little bit longer while the global elite dig in and prepare for total collapse. Connect the dots, connect these headlines, connect the reports I've given in the past about the grand chessboard Brzezinski, the global advisor, Brzezinski, and his layout for securing the last of Earth's resources in the Middle East, all the dots I've tried to connect in previous shows, all of these dots are coming to fruition. Another headline, the upcoming historic silver shortage. Many people think if they own precious metals, they'll be safe. You can't eat those metals. More people will be worried about their next bite of food very soon. And although metals are likely safer than the fiat currencies that are running the planet, they're simply objects. You can't live off that, period. And this is the facade of the human race, thinking somehow they can make safe investments and weather the storm. Those investments mean nothing when you have a planet that won't support life. They mean nothing. Another headline, Venezuelans pick through trash for food to eat or sell. Venezuela is one of many countries that have been targeted by the U.S. to topple. I'll get to greater detail on that story later in this broadcast, but that's how bad it is in South America. Other countries are going to domino with Venezuela. We live on a finite planet with finite resources, a ball of rock in a hostile environment of space that through a miraculous set of conditions has supported life. And our species has been so unimaginably arrogant and destructive with this miraculous planet that we are now reaping the consequences, and those consequences will grow radically fast from here on out. Another headline, the U.S. government has recently issued 2 alarming warnings to prep. But is anybody listening? Why is our government telling us that? Because those in the ranks of the government at the higher levels know exactly what's unfolding. Is their warning sincere? No. It's perhaps just to test the water. But certainly, those who run our government, the global elite, know exactly what's coming. And they are fueling that fire with everything they do. Another headline, U.S. military tests massive GPS jamming weapon over California. Why would a military test something like this over their own countrymen? Because those who run the military don't give a damn about their own country or their own population. And for those enlisted in the military, I'm only asking you, whatever your motives, and I'm sure I know that many honorable people are in the U.S. military. But if you don't open your eyes and look at the bigger picture, how can you preserve your honor? Honor is not blind. It's not blind. If it is blind, it's no longer honor. It's something else. Please open your eyes and look at what you're a part of. Look at what you're participating in. California, that's also been slaughtered by a completely climate-engineered drought. And with all of these headlines, as with all of my shows, I state, please don't believe anything I'm saying. But if you care at all for your children, if you care at all for their future, you have an obligation to investigate everything I'm saying. Another headline, drones emerge from shadows to become key cog in U.S. war machine. Why are the drones so important? Because they can be easily managed. Why did our government GPS every single doorstep for every citizen in this country? Is that connected to the gearing up of the drones in this country? Is that connected to the 2.4 billion rounds of ammunition that U.S. agencies have now collected? Is that for use on their own citizens when the same kind of social unrest comes to the U.S. that is now visiting Venezuela? The storm is coming. If you don't believe it, you will. Another headline, trillions spent on violence as world continues downward spiral away from peace. The equilibrium, the delicate balance of industrialized society is imploding. It's imploding rapidly. It was never sustainable. The sooner we open our eyes, the sooner we face that, the more we may have yet to salvage. Another headline, the Strait of Hormuz in danger. This is the strait that Iran controls. This is where much of the global flow of oil moves. And as these links in the chain begin to drop out, the disruption of industrialized society will again continue to unfold. And in preparation for that, what is the U.S. doing? They're fueling this process. They're provoking powers around the globe. This headline alludes to that. Rehearsing for World War III, Operation Anaconda 16 is a dangerous provocation. The U.S. is conducting war games on the borders of China, Russia, putting in missile installations. They're doing things that our country and our citizens would never tolerate on our borders. Never. So why is it the American population waves their flags blindly? And as I stated on last week's show, blind patriotism is tyranny. Period. Absolute tyranny. So if the Americans have any sincerity, they will wake up, look at the bigger picture, and stop participating in the global provocation that their government is conducting around the planet. Because our government has, those who run our government have few cards left to play. As the biosphere implodes, global economies will follow, desperation will set in, and it's setting in now, and the Western power structure, specifically the U.S. government, is showing all the signs of that desperation. Another headline, Bilderberg Group meeting, what actually happens at the world's most secretive gathering of global elites, and who is attending. These are the people that run the planet. It's not Trump, it's not Clinton, it's not Obama, it's not Bush. They are simply puppets in the play. If you support the facade, you are participating in the insanity. It's all an illusion. It's time to look at real news and real data. A few environmental headlines. Wisconsin beekeepers battle dramatic honeybee losses. We already have peer-reviewed study to prove aluminum is killing bees. This is a much bigger source of their die-off than the glyphosate. Those who have not heard this story or are unfamiliar with it, please just search bees/aluminum and you'll find lots of data to prove the bees are dying from aluminum. Where's the aluminum coming from? It's coming from climate engineering programs that are bombarding the planet with toxic heavy metals, starting with aluminum. And it's not just the bees. Every single one of us are sucking in this metal. The bees have 70 times more aluminum in them than it takes to cause Alzheimer's or dementia in a human being. These bioavailable metals are building up in all of us. Another headline, air pollution now major contributor to stroke, global study finds. An excerpt from this headline, scientists say finding is alarming and shows that harm caused by air pollution to the lungs, heart, and brain has been underestimated. What a surprise, because as I've said every single week, agencies that the public is told exist to protect them, EPA and so on, are simply there to hide the problem, not to expose it, but to mask it. So the air pollution, what is the single largest source of atmospheric aerosol? And that's a fine particulate suspended in the atmosphere. It's called an aerosol. What's the greatest source of that pollution? Global climate engineering. It's the express goal of the geoengineers to saturate the atmosphere with unimaginably small particulates for solar radiation management and other manipulation of the Earth's life support systems. And it's not just climate manipulation. Again, we have electronic weapons, we have over-the-horizon radar, EMP weapons, again, electromagnetic pulse weapons. There is so much going on in our atmosphere. It's not just this or that, it's many things. But climate engineering, primary factor. Another headline, El Nino, rising seas spur record clear sky flooding. What does clear sky flooding mean? It means there was no storm. It simply means the ocean is rising rapidly. An excerpt from this report. El Nino and rising sea levels linked to global warming spurred a record number of days of flooding last year in 7 U.S. cities, according to a federal report. The oceans are rising, and for those who watch ridiculous propaganda films like Climate Hustle, and who believe whatever it feels good for them to believe, I should say, that's a coward's way out. If you're simply accepting completely fabricated headlines and stories because it feels good for you to believe that the party's not ending, to believe that anybody who tries to sound the alarm is simply an alarmist. You're living in denial. Oceans don't rise from a cooling planet or a planet that's not warming. Oceans rise because ice is melting around the globe, and that's the fact of the matter. Another headline: Alaska continues to bake in record warm temperatures. Alaska and the Arctic are in a runaway warming mode, as is the rest of the planet. Can't hide that for much longer. That means you can't hide geoengineering. That means the power structure will become much more desperate. More on those headlines in a moment. Final environmental headline: could Arctic ice disappear for the first time in millennia? In fact, some reports state Arctic ice, we have not had an ice-free Arctic for as much as 3 million years or more. We may have an ice-free Arctic at the end of the melt season this summer or next. Geoengineers are frantically, chemically ice nucleating in the Arctic to try to keep that headline from happening. More data on that is at geoengineeringwatch.org for those who choose to investigate. Another headline: extent of ocean surface above 86 degrees hits new record during May of 2016. Reefs are dying. Fish are dying. The oceans are dying. The oceans die, the planet dies. If the boreal forests die, the planet dies. How simple is this? While Americans are concerning themselves only with, again, their new automobile with nothing down, no interest, and no payments for 6 months, as if that's the harbinger of a sustainable world, it's truly an astounding time that we live in, period. An excerpt from this report on the warming oceans. Not only is human forced warming of the globe expected to increase average surface ocean and land temperatures, it is also expected to generate higher peak readings over larger and larger regions. Such was the case during May of 2016 as massive expanses of the world's oceans saw temperatures rocket above 30 degrees Celsius or 86 degrees Fahrenheit. That's extremely warm. And this is a nonlinear equation. We'll get to another headline on the same theme. Headline: wildfires in Russia, much worse than you could imagine. An excerpt from this headline: forest management in Russia is in crisis. State foresters and firefighting services don't have enough resources, like experienced firefighters, foresters, and equipment. That's why they try to hide the problem and to underestimate the scale, just like the U.S. does, by the way. That's why Greenpeace Russia's main goal is to not let the government hide wildfires. Now, I want to expand on that mention of Greenpeace, as if Greenpeace is the harbinger of truth. Then why isn't Greenpeace saying anything about the climate engineering insanity that's fueling the fires in Russia, that's fueling the fires in North America and everywhere else around the globe? Single greatest cause of forest fire increase is the climate engineering insanity, period. For those who don't understand that equation, simply search geoengineering causing fires. You'll find plenty to look at. Greenpeace is as hypocritical as all the other environmental groups that are not addressing climate engineering. I debated Greenpeace's top scientist on national radio. A discussion, I would perhaps better categorize that. I went as far as I could without being taken off the air to expose this Greenpeace scientist for his willingness to deny the climate engineering issue. And anybody who would listen to that broadcast, and it's online, would see clearly that this Greenpeace scientist absolutely knew that climate engineering was real and ongoing, but simply wouldn't admit to it. So we have the environmental community that has behaved with unimaginable hypocrisy across the board by their continued denial of climate engineering. And this includes organizations like 350.org with Bill McGibbon, Sierra Club, Democracy Now!, all these so-called environmentally oriented groups that are in total denial about the single greatest environmental assault of all, climate engineering. Now, as we get to the picture of decline, this is a headline, the picture of decline about the American empire. And for those who are blind to this decline, you will soon be forced to wake. I want to read some excerpts from this report about the decline of the U.S. empire. Quote, a population of illiterate, non-thinking individuals can't possibly obtain good-paying jobs. This country spends $12,000 per public school student per year on education, and this is the outcome. The factual data presented below paints a picture of an empire in rapid decline. We are too far gone. No amount of money or presidential election is going to change this. We chose this path in the 1960s, and now we'll reap the consequences. Now, we have those in power implementing programs like Common Core. And anybody who has a child in Common Core would have some understanding of what I'm saying. These programs are designed to get kids to think in the box, period. Don't question authority. Do as you're told. And that's the kind of nation we seem to have at this point. We must break that paradigm down if we are to have any chance in changing course. The course that we're on leads to certain mathematical near-term extinction, period. Some statistics to back up what I just said. Education. In a study of literacy among 20 high-income countries, the U.S. ranked 12th. 12th. Not a very high ranking. Another statistic. Literacy has become such a serious problem in our country that 44 million adults are now unable to read a simple story to their children. How alarming is that? Another statistic. 50% of adults, this is U.S. adults, cannot read a book written at an 8th grade level. How alarming is that? Another statistic. 45 million are functionally illiterate and read below the 5th grade level. Another. 44% of American adults do not read a book in a year. Another. 6 out of 10 households do not buy a single book in a year. 6 out of 10. Statistics from the economy. According to the Pew Research Center, the median income of middle-class households declined by 4% from 2000 to 2014. Another statistic. The Pew Research Center has also found that median wealth for middle-class households dropped by an astounding 28% between 2011 and 2013. Another. There are still 900,000 fewer middle-class jobs in America than there were when the last recession began, but the population has grown significantly larger since that time. Now, for those who buy the nonsense that the unemployment is going down, for those who buy the nonsense that the economy is getting better because the stock market is being artificially kept afloat, these are real statistics. The unemployment level goes down because every month hundreds of thousands of people fall off the back end of the conveyor. They no longer count. They're not considered in the equation, so unemployment magically goes down. It's all a grand illusion. Wake up to that fact. Another statistic. According to the Social Security Administration, 51% of all American workers make less than $30,000 a year. Another, an astounding 48.8% of all 25-year-old Americans still live at home with their parents. Another fact. According to the U.S. Census Bureau, 49% of all Americans now live in a home that receives money from the government each month, and nearly 47 million Americans are living in poverty right now. The system is imploding. Printing money with no basis will not keep it afloat much longer. These are actual statistics. 2 more. In 2007, about 1 out of 8 children in America was on food stamps. Today that number is 1 out of 5. Final fact in this report, the median net worth of families in the United States was $137,000 in 2007. Today it is just $82,000. Now, what happens when a society is in decline, when those who run the government are doing everything they can to hide it until the last possible moment, when the biosphere is imploding, which means the illusion can't be kept afloat much longer, when all the walls are closing in, what do those who really run the governments do? They become extremely desperate and they start global conflict. Let's get to some headlines that back up that conclusion. From Reuters, Russia says U.S. refuses talks on missile defense system. From that report, Obama slams door in Putin's face, says if Putin doesn't want Russia's retaliatory forces eliminated, he'll need to be the one to press the nuclear button first. How does a man like Obama get the Nobel Peace Prize? He's using drones on innocent populations around the globe. He's pushing toward global conflict. What sort of Orwellian world do we live in? More excerpts from this report. Actions speak louder than mere words, and U.S. President Barack Obama has now acted. Not only spoken, his action is to refuse to discuss with Russian President Vladimir Putin Russia's biggest worry about recent changes in America's nuclear strategy, particularly a stunning change that is terrifying Putin. On Sunday, June 5th, Reuters headline, Russia says U.S. refuses talks on missile defense system, and reported that the United States has refused Russian offers to discuss Washington's missile defense program. Russian Deputy Defense Minister Anatoly Antonov was quoted as saying on Sunday, calling the initiative very dangerous. Russia's concern is that if the ballistic missile defense or anti-ballistic missile system that the United States is now installing near Russian borders works, then the United States will be able to launch a surprise nuclear attack against Russia, and the system, which has been in development for decades, will annihilate the missiles that Russia launches in retaliation, which will then leave Russian population with no retaliation at all except for the nuclear contamination of the entire northern hemisphere and the global nuclear winter. Continuing from this report, that theory of a winnable nuclear war, which the U.S. seems to be replacing to the prior theory called MAD, mutually assured destruction, was first prominently put forth in 2006 in the prestigious U.S. Journal of Foreign Affairs, headlining, quote, The Rise of Nuclear Primacy, and which advocated for a much bolder U.S. strategic policy against Russia based upon what it argued was America's technological superiority against Russia's weaponry, and possibly a limited time window in which to take advantage of this before Russia catches up and the opportunity to do so is gone. This is what those in power are about. Total power, total control. It's not about America's military spreading freedom throughout the globe. It's not about democracy. It's about total control. And as far as Russia's military goes, I was in Leningrad right after the Iron Curtain came down, and I saw Russian military hardware there. And it was extremely dilapidated and dated. And I'm not saying Russia doesn't have major military capability when it comes to nuclear weaponry and so forth. But the U.S. is always overblowing threats from all countries, and Russia is not the one provoking here, nor is China. It's the U.S. And how much were we told that Saddam Hussein's incredibly capable army, which it wasn't, how much were we told that it was? Well, the U.S. on the highway of death slaughtered over 100,000 Iraqis that were simply doing what they were told, were trying to retreat to their country, and it's appalling what had happened in that event. Just like the dropping of nuclear weapons on 2 civilian cities in Japan that was still today is defended by those in the U.S. as being necessary when it wasn't. It wasn't. When will Americans face up to real history? Finishing from this report, Russia's making its preparations just in case because of the U.S. missile defense system which is really an offensive system being put on their borders. Russia's preparing because they're literally being surrounded by the U.S. and NATO countries. They're being boxed in. So is China. Those who run the U.S. military are unimaginably desperate for all the reasons I've cited in this show and others. The facade they have created is imploding. The giant military industrial juggernaut of insanity, which is their last card to play, is going to be put in use if we stay on this course. I want to get to another report by Dr. Paul Craig Roberts. This is a former Reagan administration official. Dr. Roberts has been a very strong voice for sanity in a world that's imploding. This headline from Dr. Roberts is called Somnolent Europe, Russia and China. This headline, this report, continues from Dr. Roberts. Declassified American government documents show that the U.S. intelligence community ran a campaign in the 50s and 60s to build momentum for a united Europe. It funded and directed the European Federalist movement. Continuing from the report, the documents confirm suspicious suspicions voiced at the time that America was working aggressively behind the scenes to push Britain into a European state. One memorandum dated July 26, 1950 gives instructions for a campaign to promote a fully fledged European Parliament. It is signed by General William Donovan, head of the American Wartime Office of Strategic Services, precursor of the CIA. The documents show that the European Union was a creature of the CIA. It is Washington's self-centeredness, the self-absorption, the extraordinary hubris and arrogance that explains the orchestrated, quote, Russian threat. Always orchestrated. How many countries do we hear this about from Washington? Whoever is not going along with the policy of those who run our empire is immediately labeled as a threat. Even small countries that couldn't possibly threaten the U.S. are labeled as if there's some dire threat to our citizenry. The American population needs to wake up to how totally they're being manipulated. Our brothers and sisters in the U.S. military need to wake up to the fact that they're being used as paid mercenaries for those who run the empire. Continuing from Dr. Roberts' report, Russia has not presented herself to the West as a military threat, period. Yet Washington is confronting Russia with a U.S.-NATO naval buildup in the Black Sea and a troop buildup in the Baltics and Poland. Also, missile bases, as I mentioned earlier, on Russia's borders, and plans to incorporate the former Russian province of Georgia and Ukraine in a U.S. defense pact against Russia. The report continues. When Washington, its generals, and European vassals declare Russia to be a threat, they mean that Russia has an independent foreign policy and it acts in her own interest rather than in Washington's interest. Just as I said earlier, any country that doesn't toe the line for Western hegemony is labeled a threat and toppled or surrounded. The report continues, Russia is a threat because Russia demonstrated the capability of blocking Washington's intended invasion of Syria and bombing of Iran. Russia blunted one purpose of Washington's coup in the Ukraine by peacefully and democratically reuniting with Crimea, the site of Russia's Black Sea naval base, and a Russian province for several centuries. Did our media tell us that? That Crimea was always a part of Russia prior to the U.S. toppling of the Ukraine? I've been to Ukraine as well. I've been to Kiev. And to see what's happening there, or what our country, those who run our country, I should say, has done to facilitate that destruction is alarming and appalling. And I'm not saying Putin is in any sense a saint at all, or any of the other governments around the globe, but I'm simply saying that the provocateur on global affairs at this time, by far, is the Western power structure, specifically the United States, because they're running out of options, because the biosphere is imploding, the facade of a perpetually expanding industrialized society on a finite planet with finite resources is imploding, and now they're playing every card they have that all relate to the military-industrial complex. Finishing Dr. Craig's report, perhaps you have wondered how it was possible for small countries such as Iraq, Libya, Syria, Yemen, and Venezuela to be threats to the U.S. superpower. On its face, Washington's claim is absurd. Do U.S. presidents, Pentagon officials, national security advisors, and chairmen of the Joint Chiefs of Staff really regard countries of so little capability as military threats to the United States and NATO countries? Of course they don't. As I stated earlier, these countries are simply not towing the line for the power structure. Final excerpt from this report. No, they do not categorize such countries as threats. The countries were declared threats because they have or had prior to their destruction independent foreign and economic policies. Their policy independence means that they do not or did not accept U.S. hegemony. They were attacked in order to bring them under U.S. hegemony. In Washington's view, any country with an independent policy is outside Washington's umbrella and therefore is a threat. In the United States, truth-tellers are persecuted and imprisoned, or they are dismissed as, quote, conspiracy theorists or anti-Semites and domestic extremists. The Western world consists of a dystopia far worse than the one described by George Orwell in his famous book, 1984. Again, This is from Dr. Paul Craig Roberts, former Reagan administration official, and he finishes with this statement. Quote, "My prediction is that Russia and China will soon be confronted with an unwelcome decision: accept American hegemony or go to war." Who is the provocateur here? The United States of America. Now, back to what's happening in our environment and why that is so much at the core of the desperation of the military-industrial complex at this time. They have no more cards to play. A headline from Global Research, online news source with much credible data. This is a headline on our world environment. Profiteering from death, devastation, and destruction is now the norm. This is the fact of the matter. And on that note, I want to read a report from Dr. Glenn Berry on this theme, titled "The Sheer Terror of Looming Biosphere Collapse." This is the core of all that's unfolding on the planet right now. From this report, the global ecological system is collapsing and dying as humanity overruns natural ecosystems and the climate. We're entering an age of unrelenting violence and suffering prior to the biosphere collapse and the end of being, unless dramatic social change based upon global ecology and ethics arises quickly. Humans evolved with a lush and vibrant Eden teeming with life, which until just a few generations ago provided for natural abundance and the prospect of perpetual human existence. We are one of many species utterly dependent upon natural ecosystems for all our needs, including air, water, food, and shelter. The rise of ecological colonialism and the Industrial Revolution changed all that, as unimaginably ancient, naturally evolved ecosystems became fodder to be liquidated and consumed for accumulation of paper wealth. The disambiguation of buying our needs with money has led us to deny our ecological nature. Continuing from this report, for 2 centuries, humanity has waged an unrelenting war upon nature. Ecological habitats and their wildlife residents have been slaughtered incessantly. Entire species have been wiped out as their members have been burnt, shot, tortured, and left to starve. Whole ecosystems have been dismantled to create consumer goods that quickly are thrown away. Concurrently, Western science has learned that indigenous peoples have long known, that we are but one species in a web of life that is all one, intertwined, a miraculous system whereby life creates the conditions for life. Those in touch with nature realize ecology is the meaning of life, and that without ecology, there can be no economy. This is what I have said over and over and over on this report, week in, week out. Continuing from this report, it has become increasingly obvious to experts and as astute laypersons that the ecological fabric of being is fraying. We now know that ecological boundaries exist and that the human endeavor has overshot them. Old-growth forests remain as tawdry remnants. Soil has become lifeless and sterile. Oceans are dying, and water and food are scarce for humanity and kindred spirits. I want to insert this again. Though this report does not mention climate engineering specifically, climate engineering is the single greatest assault the human race has ever launched against the web of life, but not the only assault, obviously. Too many people are beating that drum as if climate engineering is the only problem. It's not the only problem. The list of assaults launched by the human race against the web of life is endless. Climate engineering happens to be at the top of the heap, but by no means the only problem we face. But it is the biggest problem. It's the one we should focus on first. Continuing from the report, ever-expanding human numbers have lost sight of our place within ecology and have little knowledge of the natural world. Instead, well-being is defined by mobile apps and expensive playthings that soon grow old and are discarded. For many, life is a search for status and stuff, utterly detached from the condition of natural capital that makes all life possible. And for the rest, the large percentage of people living in an abject poverty, life is a squalid struggle to meet basic needs amidst Disney-fied conspicuous overconsumption by celebrities and bankers. The report continues. Long a war-prone species, as I've alluded to earlier in this report, humans have concurrent with ecocide nonetheless undergone remarkable social evolution, whereby slavery's prohibition, women's rights, freedom of thought, and representative democracy, with some progress on racial equality, has largely been achieved. Nonetheless, attempts last century to eliminate war have failed miserably. Overpopulated inequity in an age of resource scarcity, stoked by grotesquely wasteful overconsumption by the few, fuels a rise of authoritarian fascism and conflict between the haves and the have-lesses and the have-nots. Few diagnose the state of permawar waged by lone terrorists and drones as the result of environmental decline. But that's exactly what it is. Exactly what I alluded to in last week's report and the one before that, when we have things happening in places like Nigeria where their environment has been completely trashed by the Western pursuit of resources, and now terrorism is ensuing there because there's not enough left for them to survive. Continuing with this report. Yet the coming anarchy can be seen all around us by those who wish to see. Not many of those, is there? As the saying goes, there are none so blind as those who refuse to see. The report continues. Streams of refugees flee collapsing ecosystems and abrupt climate change. Traditional food stocks from the oceans and forests are virtually exhausted. Saving seas has become a radical act of resistance, as all that is natural is commodified, homogenized, and toxified. Basic seasonality fails as abrupt climate change takes over. And climate engineering, let's add that to the equation. Continuing. And what remains of natural vegetation is sickly and fragmented, no longer connected to provide the matrix of ecological services upon which all life depends. All around are well-meaning people pursuing pieces of the solution. Organic permaculture, ending fossil fuels, protecting and restoring natural ecosystems, consuming less, and other acts of righteous ecological living are occurring. But it is too little, too late, by orders of magnitude, as the sheer inertia of ecocide found in mass, overpopulation, and consumption prepares its final assault upon the natural world. Already societies and economies are collapsing from Syria to Haiti, and including the downturn in economic aspirations for the poverty-stricken. The Earth's capacity to provide for human well-being is collapsing. Every last natural ecosystem is to be mopped up for the chopsticks and the last drop of oil. Not only will your children not have more than you have, they may die in an unimaginably horrendous ecological apocalypse. Final excerpts from this report. Every month without the rise of an ecological ethic, we fall deeper into nothingness as the signs of a sick ecosystem and a dysfunctional climate are yet even now written off by the ecologically challenged. Soon as the pillages of war and ecocide come to your neighborhood, you can expect to know hunger and disease and the bad kind of anarchy. Expect to face firsthand the terror of biosphere collapse, where as social order disintegrates, your mothers, wives, and daughters are raped along with your sons, sold into slavery before they and you die like famished stray dogs as industrialized society fails and collapses. Work to live and grow a global ecology ethic. Otherwise, the hairless ape that shows all intentions of pulling down the biosphere as we frantically seek more, not understanding there is no more to be had. The sky is falling. The earth is nearly dead. The end of being looms. This report by Dr. Glenn Berry is completely on target. And for those who choose to ignore such a report, ignoring it will not save you. I want to, in the final moments of this show, elaborate on my trip to Yosemite and these type of connections, how important they are. My connection with climber Ron Koch. And as I stated, I was in Yosemite last week for the first time in 20 years, and I can't express the shock and dismay I felt at seeing the utter devastation there, both in and out of the valley itself. And my trip to survey the forest die-off, as I stated, was prompted by a recent contact I received from world-famous rock climber Ron Koch. Ron is a living legend in climbing circles. Search his name online, read his Wikipedia page for some of Ron's history and accomplishments. On my trip to Yosemite National Park to meet with and interview Ron, I was reeling at the sight of dead and dying forests on all sides. The forest die-off in Yosemite is nothing short of catastrophic, and it's a harbinger of what is unfolding all over the world at blinding speed. Once in the Yosemite Valley, I and my 17-year-old daughter Minga, my 11-year-old son Aris, had the distinct honor of spending 3 days with Ron. The honor of hearing his perspectives on the profound and horrific changes occurring in Yosemite at blinding speed. The feats of rock face climbing that have been accomplished by Ron Koch and those like him are truly unimaginable to most. And I myself am not daunted by much, and I've done a lot of things around the globe with spearfishing around the globe and deep blue water spearfishing, diving. I've done some rock climbing. I've done a lot in the wilderness. I've lived in the wilderness. But the kind of climbing that people like Ron do is so far beyond what seems humanly possible that this is a harbinger to their connection to the natural world. If you stand at the base of mountains like El Capitan and look up that rock face, you can't imagine, I can't imagine that anyone could possibly scale that. And the only motive to do so is because they are connected with nature in that sense. To scale what seems completely impossible. And Ron, because of his connection with nature, because of his connection with the Yosemite Valley, has long since taken note of the insanity in the skies, the climate engineering assault. And Ron is doing his absolute best to sound the alarm on this issue to all those around him. He's shown tremendous courage and leadership, as he always has. He's been a leader in the rock climbing community. Everywhere I went in Yosemite, if I mentioned Ron's name when I wasn't with him, everybody knew him. Everyone there knows him. Because he's lived his life in a manner to try to give back to the whole. And it is Ron's willingness to address the climate engineering insanity that brought us together. And I can't say what Ron felt about our meeting and our sharing of ideas and strategies regarding the critical effort to expose and halt the climate engineering insanity. But I can say this about what I felt about meeting Ron. I felt as if I had found a long-lost brother, truly. That I knew who he was before he reached out to me some months ago. I was familiar with his accomplishments. And I was so uplifted by the first message I got from Ron, knowing that he was aware of this issue and fully willing to address it. Now, at some of our meetings, Ron and I, at various locations in the breathtaking confines of the Yosemite Valley, we were filmed, and we are collectively working on a video to document the dire die-off in this sacred place and the unfolding destruction that is directly connected to the global climate engineering assault. And with various agency officials in this valley, and I spoke to many while I was there. I spoke to Forest Service and some of the park people. I spoke to fire agencies. As I always do whenever I travel, I make many stops. I pass on data to everyone. So many as of yet unaware of the problem. And others had heard of the issue but not been given credible data. And when you're trying to share this issue, I want to stress how important it is to use the science terms, to pass on credible data, and not to venture off on conjecture as to what these programs are about. Stand on the building blocks of data that we can prove, that we can back up. The Senate documents, government documents, patents, all highlighting the fact that these programs are an attempt by governments around the globe to manipulate the climate for their benefit, to use the climate and weather and the environment as a weapon. These are the building blocks. Stand on these if you want to gain traction in this fight. Don't point at the sky and go into emotional rants, because that doesn't help gain credibility. It simply shuts people down. Stick to the science terms. The chemtrails term does not help our cause. If you want to use that term in your own private conversations with people who already know this issue exists, or you want to point out that this is a layman's term for what is a science issue, that's one thing. But if you stand on that term because it just feels good to you, you're not helping our cause. And I spend much of my time trying to erase the damage done by people who rely only on that term, a term that leads anybody who searches the term straight to conspiracy theory and hoax. If you want to help in this fight, understand we're playing a game of chess. Learn how to play that game effectively. So in regard to our efforts in Yosemite, the icon of nature for many around the world, we will try to expose what's happening there, and I look forward to working with Ron on this film project and on an ongoing basis. And again, I consider it an honor to have met and spent time with him. As the horizon grows darker by the day, it's up to each and every one of us to avoid the coward's way out of claiming we're all powerless in the equation. So why even try? And many take this position. A great many. I can't do anything, so why try? And that is the coward's way out. It's up to each and every one of us to remember that indeed we each have great power to alter the equation if we simply choose to march in the correct direction. As the ancient proverb states, to take one step on the correct path is to have arrived. The journey is the destination. And to simply sit the bench is not an option. It's not an option. If we all choose to properly prioritize our efforts and our energies, starting with an effective and efficient effort in the fight for the greater good, such an effort begins by waking those around you to the gravity and immediacy of what's unfolding. And this is best accomplished by passing on credible and verifiable data, as I stated earlier, not by emotional rants that only shut down the very people that you are trying to wake up. Now, if you have flyers with you, credible flyers in the case of the climate engineering issue, which again is the most dire and most immediate threat we face short of nuclear cataclysm, because we are being slow killed. The environment is being slow killed, and whatever the motives about power and control, hiding a runaway global warming effect, which is happening. We're in a runaway event right now. And the efforts of the climate engineers to mask this fact from the population and to use the weather as a weapon for their own purposes is fueling the fire. It's fueling the overall fire. And if we could expose this to the planet as a whole, to populations as a whole, so that every person on the planet knows that they have been irreparably harmed by their own governments, because governments around the globe are cooperating in the insanity in our skies. And if we could awaken to the world, we could awaken the world to that fact, there would be a shockwave around the globe. And each of us can play a part in that awakening if we simply take steps every single day, constructive, efficient, effective, thought-out, rational steps to make that happen. Not emotional rants, not pointing at the sky with no data to pass on to anybody. I met with CAL FIRE officials yesterday, very reasonable men. I know a lot of CAL FIRE people that listened to what I had to say in spite of the fact that they had been formerly alienated from this issue by those who knock on their door, drag them outside, point at the sky and rant using the term chemtrails. That didn't help. It took me some time to erase that damage and to get these people on the right track with credible data, which I left with them. So use your sense of reason to effectively raise awareness with those around you while you can. Because we need to ask ourselves, each of us, what will we do this day to correct the course of certain suicide that the human race is currently on? The remaining web of life on this once thriving planet is depending on our combined actions. Make every day count toward the common good. Until next week, this is Dane Wigington with GeoEngineeringWatch.org.